Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be tackling something that I think a lot of us photographers struggle with, color theory.
Yeah.
And more specifically, how we can use it to make our photos better.
Right.
So we're looking at a YouTube video today by photographer Podcats. It's called The Ultimate Guide to Color Theory. In just 12 minutes, photography, visual patterns, #4.
Cool.
And by the end of this deep dive, you should have a pretty good grasp on the basics.
For sure.
And some practical tips that you can apply to your work right away.
Absolutely.
Plus, we're going to be talking about a really cool challenge that Pat brings up that could totally change how you're seeing the world.
Oh, awesome.
And photographing it, of course.
Looking forward to that.
So to start things off, Pat breaks down some key terms right off the bat.
Okay.
Like hue, saturation, luminosity, and temperature.
Yeah. These are the ones you always hear, but
Yeah,
don't always totally understand.
Yeah, I feel like I mix them up all the time.
Me too.
Yeah.
So hue is the pure color,
Right.
like red or blue.
Gotcha.
And then you have saturation, which is how intense the color is.
So like if you turn the vibrancy up.
Yeah, think of it like that.
Okay.
And then luminosity is how bright or dark it is.
Okay. So like a fire engine red versus a dark maroon.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
They're both red,
Mhm.
but they have different luminosity.
That makes total sense.
And then temperature is like warm or cool.
Okay. So like oranges and reds versus like blues and greens.
Exactly.
Okay. So those are actually pretty simple when you lay it out like that.
Yeah,
But now thinking about how they all work together,
right.
like say you're shooting a portrait and you want to create a certain feeling, like
Mhm.
warmth and intimacy.
Yeah, so maybe you'd use a red with like high saturation and luminosity for the subject's clothes.
Okay.
And then you could use a background with cooler tones and lower saturation to make them pop.
Oh, that's interesting. I
Yeah.
hadn't thought about it like that before.
Yeah. And another thing that Pat mentions is that mixing colors in digital photography.
Yes.
It's different than like traditional art. Yeah, he talked about RGB.
Right. So with traditional art, you're mixing pigments, but with digital, it's all about light.
Okay.
So with RGB, adding more red, green, and blue actually makes things brighter.
Oh, that's why when you overexpose a photo, it gets all washed out.
Exactly. You're basically pushing the RGB values so high that it's almost white.
Okay. I've definitely done that before, but never really understood why.
Happens to the best of us.
Okay, so now moving on to something that I find super fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
The psychology of color.
Right.
So Pat talks about these objective truths behind colors and their meanings.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating because there are these universal associations,
Okay.
but then there are also cultural variations and personal interpretations.
Right.
So it gets complicated, but like let's take red, for example.
Right.
It's often associated with passion, danger, energy.
Right.
You see it a lot in action photos or when someone's trying to create a sense of urgency.
Mm-hmm.
But in some cultures, it can symbolize good luck or prosperity.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, so it's not always so straightforward.
Yeah. So like green, I've always heard represents tranquility and growth.
Yeah, because of nature.
Right.
Which is probably why it's so popular for landscape photographers.
Makes sense.
But you also see it a lot with like eco-friendly products
Oh, right.
to give that sense of naturalness and sustainability.
Oh, so it's not just about aesthetics.
Right.
It's about like the feeling you want to convey.
Exactly.
So what about some of the other colors?
Okay.
What about orange?
Orange is often about creativity, warmth, enthusiasm.
So like joyful moments.
Yeah, or optimism.
Okay, cool. What about yellow?
Yellow is pretty simple. It's sunshine, happiness, optimism.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's a happy color.
Okay, cool. What about blue?
Blue is interesting.
Yeah, I feel like that's a popular one.
It's often about calmness, trust, stability.
Okay.
Because of the sky and the ocean.
Right.
You know how like corporations use blue a lot to seem professional and reliable?
Yeah, I never thought about it like that.
It can also create a sense of serenity.
Right. You see a lot of blues in travel photos.
Exactly.
Especially landscapes and seascapes.
Yeah, it really does give you that peaceful feeling.
What about purple?
Purple is kind of a regal color.
Yeah, it's a cool color.
It's often associated with luxury, royalty, spirituality. Because it was used in royal garments and religious ceremonies way back when.
Right.
It can add a sense of mystery or wonder to your images.
Yeah. You see it a lot in fantasy photos.
Exactly.
And of course, we can't forget about black and white.
Right.
Even though they're technically not colors.
Yeah.
They're still so important.
Oh, absolutely. Black is power, elegance, mystery.
Yeah.
It's great for dramatic portraits or cityscapes with high contrast.
What about white?
White is purity, innocence, simplicity.
It's a clean look.
It can create a sense of spaciousness, minimalism.
Yeah. Or like highlight a subject against a plain background.
Exactly.
Wow. So it's amazing how even the absence of color can evoke so much.
Right.
Okay, so now that we've talked about individual colors and what they mean,
Yeah.
how do we actually use this knowledge when we're out taking photos?
That's where the concept of color harmony comes in.
Okay, cool.
And that's what we'll get into next.
Awesome. I'm excited to hear about that.
Me too.
So we'll be right back after a quick break.
So we know about individual colors.
Yeah.
But how do we actually put them together?
So that's where color harmony comes in.
Okay.
It's basically finding combinations that are visually pleasing.
Gotcha. So, like, how do we know which colors work well together?
Well, Pat suggests using the Adobe Color tool.
Okay.
You can play around with different combos and see how they interact.
I've heard of that. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, it's really useful.
So what are some of the combinations we're talking about?
So Pat focuses on 3 main harmony groups.
Okay.
Analogous, monochromatic, and complementary.
Okay, I've heard those terms before, but...
So analogous colors are next to each other on the color wheel.
Okay.
Like blues and greens or yellows and oranges.
Right.
They create a sense of unity.
Like a sunset.
Exactly.
You see all those reds, oranges, and yellows blending together. Yeah, nature's got it figured out.
And then monochromatic is using different shades of one color.
Right, it's all about playing with the saturation and luminosity.
So like a black and white photo.
Exactly.
I actually really like monochromatic palettes.
Yeah, they can be really elegant.
What about complementary colors?
Complementary colors are opposite each other on the color wheel.
Okay.
They create high contrast.
So like blue and orange?
That's the classic one.
Yeah, teal and orange look.
Which you see everywhere these days.
Do you ever think that's getting a bit overused?
It can be if it's not used well.
Yeah.
But it can still be really effective if you're intentional about it.
Right. It's not just about following a trend.
Exactly. It's about understanding why you're using it.
I like that. So even though color theory gives us these guidelines, we still need to develop our own eye.
Yeah, absolutely.
And make choices that fit our vision.
It's about finding your own style.
So Pat actually uses a combo of analogous and monochromatic in his work.
Right. He plays a lot with blues, whites, and oranges.
That's cool.
Yeah, it shows how you can combine different groups.
Now, he also talks about this 1 color a week challenge.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever tried that?
I have. It's really eye-opening.
Really?
Yeah, it makes you see the world differently.
When I first heard about it, I was like, oh, easy. I'll just wear the same outfit every day.
But it's way more than that.
Yeah.
It's about really understanding that color.
Like all its different nuances.
Yeah, Pat calls it developing fast recall.
What's that?
It's basically building a mental library of compositions for each color.
So when you see that color again, you already have all these ideas.
Exactly.
That reminds me of how musicians train their ear.
It's that same kind of deep intuition.
So Pat uses this example of shooting a red brick wall.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine you're doing street photography and you see this awesome red brick wall. Now, you could just take a picture of anyone walking by.
Yeah.
But because you've been focusing on red, you're thinking about its complementary color green.
Right.
So you wait for someone wearing green to walk by.
And that one choice makes the photo so much better.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great example.
It's about using color theory strategically.
So it's not just about what looks good. It's about telling a story.
Exactly. And that's what I love about this challenge.
Yeah.
It pushes you to think differently about color.
And it can actually open up more creative possibilities.
Exactly.
That's awesome. I'm definitely going to have to give that challenge a try.
You should.
Okay, so we've learned a lot about color theory today.
We have.
But how do we actually apply it to our photography?
Well, that's what we'll talk about after the break.
So much to think about when it comes to color.
It really is a whole other world.
Yeah, I feel like we've barely scratched the surface, but it's definitely made me realize that color is way more than just an aesthetic choice.
Absolutely.
It's like a powerful tool for storytelling.
Yeah, it's like adding another layer of meaning to your photos, like you're speaking a whole other language.
I love that. So for anyone listening who's ready to take their photography to the next level, what would you say is like the most important thing to keep in mind when it comes to color?
Don't be afraid to experiment.
Okay.
Like try Pat's challenge, play with different palettes, and most importantly, have fun.
Yeah.
Because color's all about creative expression.
Right. At the end of the day, photography is about sharing your vision with the world.
And color can really help you do that.
Exactly. And I think another thing to remember is that mastering color theory takes time.
For sure.
You're not going to become an expert overnight.
It's a journey.
Yeah. And the more you explore, the more you'll discover.
You start to see things differently.
Yeah. I'm already noticing colors I never paid attention to before.
That's awesome.
I think that's a really cool takeaway from this whole deep dive. It's not just about becoming a better photographer.
It's about seeing the world in a new way.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Thanks.
I think that's the perfect note to end on.
Yeah.
So for all you photographers out there,
keep shooting.
Embrace the challenge.
Yeah, experiment with color.
Have fun in your creative journey.
Oh, and here's one last thought for you.
Okay.
Think about the colors you're drawn to. What story are they trying to tell?
Wow. That's a great question to think about.
It is.
Okay, well, on that note, we'll wrap up this very colorful deep dive.
Until next time.
Keep shooting and keep exploring.